since I'm a panelist, I can't raise my.
Did you find there? No streaming. You see yourself. Below the top.
For some reason, it called me Sally, so I think maybe
Oh,
you name this one Sally.
Which one? Did you rename that one?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Oh, yeah. I'll make sure you get that.
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe that's from planning commission, huh?
Maybe.
Kind of what I thought.
Hey Jennifer, can you hear me?
Jennifer, can you hear me?
No, that wasn't muted, probably was it? Jennifer Dam, can you hear me? Hey, Mike. Good. How about you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right, very good. Thanks.
You bet. All right, welcome everybody. Before we begin, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The time is now 7 o'clock. We will call the Board of Equalization meeting to order. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. At this time, we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Let me, one moment, please. Cast your votes, please. It's like Councilmember Sukram, it didn't record your vote. Thank you. 8 council members are present, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1, Resolution 2021-017, levying a special tax and assessment in the amount of $626.16 against Jensen's, 249 West Washington, to pay the costs of weed and debris removal and assessment. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Mayor and council, thank you. We have these items occasionally. This is for a property that had weed or blight items that were removed. The cost to $626.16 includes both the cost of getting that taken care of and then a $20 recording fee to record and then eventually release that lien. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have regarding this item.
Thank you. Councilman Coons?
Yeah, is this still a holdover from the first time or is this the second time?
This property, I believe, has been cleaned a number of times. I think there's 3. Maybe this would be the 3rd item it has a lien against the property.
I guess my main concern is this borders right on the edge of Washington Elementary School. And at what point we want to be a little bit concerned that it could be a little bit of a health hazard to the children out on the playground. I mean, I just live a block away. There's critters running loose in the neighborhood, all kinds of rodents and stuff. So I'm concerned about the children's exposure. At some point, maybe this establishment ought to be raised.
Thank you. Councilman Yerger?
Following up on Councilman Coons' line of thinking in that regard, is there anything, I'm not aware, is there anything in city code about repeat offenders?
Not that I'm aware of, council member. It's something that I can inquire about to see what follow-up steps can be done.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? I would take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to adopt resolution 2021-017.
Councilman Legban.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Take a motion to adjourn the Board of Equalization meeting. Councilman Coons,
A motion to adjourn?
Councilman Legban,
I'll second that also.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0 to adjourn, Mayor.
Meeting is adjourned. We will now open the City Council regular meeting of February 9th, 2021 to order. The time is now 7:05. The Opens Meeting Act is posted on the rear wall next to the agendas. This time we'll have roll call.
Please cast your vote for roll call. Eight council members are present, Mayor.
First item is mayor's comments. Just have a couple of things I'd like to mention tonight. During the past couple weeks here, we've had some flooding in and around Fremont. Specifically want to thank Dodge County Emergency Management for their tireless efforts in regards to lowland flooding we have experienced in South Fremont and in Dodge County. But due to the additional ice jams, we continue to ask folks to be vigilant in that area. Levels remain well below flood stage and not an immediate impact to Fremont at this time. The county does not plan to open these roads, Big Island, South Ridge Road, and Ridgeland Avenue in the near future. So please be vigilant in those areas. Currently, floodwaters have begun to significantly drop and freeze onto Ridgeland Avenue and South Ridge Road. So it will be an active ice jam season. We should expect to see more flooding due to ice jams. So again, is asking everyone in that area, please be alert, take your precautions, and be vigilant. Second item is we'll be giving my State of the City address on Wednesday, February 17th at 11:30. We'll be on the Fremont Area Chamber's Facebook Live. So please tune in to that. The third I wanted to mention is just the vaccine distribution update. Did check with Three Rivers today. Their staff has administered 2,515 doses. 1,800 were first doses. 715 were second doses. Additionally, starting January 25th, they started phase 1B, allocating doses to our community partners. So with the partnership with Fremont Methodist Health over the last 3 Thursdays out at Christensen Field, they've administered a total of 1,050 doses of the vaccine. Three Rivers Health wants to remind everyone and thank them for their continued patience. In total, they have about 22,000 people in phase 1B. 65% of that is 65 plus. So we'll continue to take time to get through the current phase. We're also hearing positive things about a federal program that will start to allocate vaccines to certain pharmacies in the state of Nebraska. So those will be in addition to the doses received by Three Rivers. So want to continue to thank everyone for their continued efforts, especially Three Rivers Health Department for their efforts as well to continue to slow the spread of COVID-19. That concludes my comments. Moving on to item 1, motion to adopt current agenda for the February 9th, 2021 regular meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda from staff or from the council? Seeing none, I would take a
Mr. Mayor.
motion to approve the
Mr. Mayor.
agenda.
So we want to, staff would like to remove the checks, claims, number 2, please.
We can do
We
that.
can do
once
that
we
on
get to
consent agenda.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
I would take a motion to adopt current agenda. Councilman Yerger,
Make a motion to adopt the current agenda.
Councilwoman Ganem,
I second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to consent agenda. All items in the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the city council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or a citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda by either council staff or the public? Councilman Legman.
Yeah, I would like to remove number 7, please.
And go into staff's recommendation for item 2.
2.
Councilman Yerger.
Yes, I would like opportunity for discussion on item 5 and number 9, please.
Thank you. Any other items? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve consent agenda items 3, 4, 6, and 8. Councilman Yerger,
I'll make that motion.
Councilman Jensen,
I will second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to item 2. Motion to approve January 27, 2021 through February 9th, 2021 claims and authorized checks to be drawn on proper accounts. This time we'll have staff report.
So Mayor and City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. Tyler, did you pass those? Yeah, so we're asking that you receive this item into the record. It's an additional claim.
I would take a motion to receive. Councilman Gibson. Was that a motion? Okay, thank you. Councilman Yerger,
Second.
cast your votes to receive.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
So what Tyler passing it is out is a claim for the Dodge County Humane Society. Councilman Yerger noticed that the claim was not included in your list of claims that were emailed out. It's a city issue. We had a staff member that was gone and failed to get it to us before they left. Councilman Yerger pointed that out. And so we'd like to add that it's the recurring monthly payment to Dodge County Humane Society.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Gibson? Oh, Councilman Yerger?
I don't really have a question for staff. I want to pass off the fact that you gave me credit for that. I'd like to pass on the fact that that actually came from a member of the public.
Any other questions for staff? Councilman Gibson, you're still on. Do you have a question? Thank you. Any comments from the public?
So you have to turn that mic on. Remember that green, red to green up above there. Just tap it. Got it?
Where? Okay. Am I on?
Yep.
Good evening. I'm Susan Jacobus. I'm at 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. I also noticed the Dodge County Main Society was not paid. I was hopeful that was due to consideration of the contract now. So far, there's been nothing said to the public what the status of the contract is. And now we as a city entity, will now have sheltering in place and animal control taken care of by other entities. So I'd appreciate it if somehow you address this sooner than later on what is the status of the Dodge County Humane Society and at what is the termination date. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Looks like there's a Zoom. That's Jody. Jody, did you still? No. Okay. Seeing no other comments from the public, any additional comments from council? Seeing none, I would take a motion. Do we need to amend with this? Okay, just take a motion to approve. We need to approve the claims with the additional amount of $8,609.92. Do I have a motion into that regard? Councilman Gibson.
I would make that motion.
Councilman Legban. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5. Resolution 2021-018, allowing the chief of police and the fire chief to sign memorandum of understanding with Fremont Methodist Health for COVID-19 emergency response activities. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Jeff Elliott, Chief of Police. What you have before you is a memorandum of understanding between the city and Fremont Methodist Health in regards to providing security for points of distribution for the COVID-19 vaccine. We have the same memorandum of understanding with Three Rivers and have had it for some time. However, because the Fremont Medical Center is now providing these shots instead of Three Rivers, we had to have the memorandum of understanding with them. This memorandum of understanding is in front of you to provide us with a chance to be reimbursed for the overtime spent by the police department.
So the city, let me turn the speakers down. So the city pays for officers to be out there while they're conducting that. We have an officer that's scheduled out there. So it's at city cost. What this does, this MOU puts in place a mechanism. So if more COVID pay would come down the pike, we would be eligible for reimbursement. So.
Councilman Gibson.
Is this overtime or straight time?
Yeah, I believe, Chief, I think you're scheduling overtime, right?
It is overtime. We don't have the personnel to staff it with regular time, so it is overtime positions at this point.
Thank you.
Councilman Yerger.
Well, I had this taken off because there were, originally when I read this, I wasn't sure that I had some questions. And then the more I looked at what it said in the staff report about we're providing security and crowd control. And I guess that's coming from law enforcement as well as fire. Fire could provide some of these services as well. They're signing off on this.
Yeah, my understanding is that fire was asked to be involved in the event that fire needed to be there for a reaction, a squad reaction or something. My understanding is they are not standing by as police officers are.
Okay. So then after looking at it more closely, Chief, I guess, some concerns that come to mind is that although the report says security and crowd control, items 1 through 9 in this agreement really go far beyond security and crowd control with regards to actually control of the vaccine material and those kinds of things. And knowing that you're short-staffed as it is, and even though you're paying overtime, we're in a position, and probably need to, but we're in a position from a law enforcement perspective rather than fire to actually perform the duties being requested in items 1 through 9?
No, the agreement that you see in front of you is really a cut and paste that was delivered by Fremont Methodist Health in a hurry to be able to get the MOU to us so that we could provide the security with a chance to get paid. If you read down further through that agreement, it says that nothing in there is legally binding. We're not required to do any of that, and I have no intention of providing that because they don't need it at this point. Our concern is security at the sites. They've raised some concerns that I feel are legitimate, and we want to provide officers at the site. And the only reason this agreement is in front of you tonight is so that we have a chance to be reimbursed by the federal government if that opportunity arises.
Right. And I understand what you're saying, and there's probably definitely a need to have something documented to get reimbursed. I'm just curious as to why our memorandum didn't specifically limit us to item 3, security, rather than transport, temperature control, all these other things that can raise issues relative for the city and really appear to be beyond the scope of what you're actually going to be asked to do.
Again, Fremont Methodist Health put that, all they did was take Three Rivers' name off of it and put ours on it in an attempt to get it done quickly so that we would be covered. That was the goal there.
Travis, do you have any concerns with the language?
We do not have any at this point. It seems more of a logistical administrative hurdle than anything else.
Any other questions? Councilman Coons.
Yeah, I'm just gonna add, my firefighter training, some of these things are in here because you train for a pandemic and you train for mass hysteria. I think it's in there because, the Methodist is concerned about their own people that are going to be couriers from the hospital to the site. So I think it all needs to be in here, and there's a good legitimate reason for it.
Thank you. Any other questions for our police chief from council? Any comments from the public?
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont, Nebraska. The concerns I have wasn't with your cover sheet, your staff report. It said security. I also took issue with some of the things in here. One of them, there's HIPAA. Who's going to be copying out those documents? When people line up at 1,000, it's a massive amount of paperwork. I've been involved in doing clinics, and there's a lot of paperwork involved. The transport itself, who's responsible for that? I can't have going back and forth dialogue with the police chief or with the fire chief who hasn't weighed in on this. But according to this, our personnel, police and fire, will be transporting the product itself, which most of you know has to be kept between 42 degrees below zero and 36 degrees below zero. Who's going to watch those temperature controls and what kind of transport? This says they're going to transport the product. It doesn't say from Fremont Methodist Health over to Christensen Field. And then when it comes to copier, supplies, tables, printers, etc., the city's supplying that. According to what's in here, if you read through this, all of you as councilmen, I'm sure you did, you would see that that's in here. So temperature control would be Fremont Police, Dodge County Sheriff, and or Fremont Fire, who are going to maintain the medication in an environmental condition. How are you going to do that? I did not know we had access to that kind of freezers or that you had massive quantities of dry ice to throw on it. As far as number 5, dispensing and administering. Fremont Police, Dodge County Sheriff, Fremont Fire will develop and maintain plans to administer medication to employees and staff immediately, family members in their care within 36 hours of the request to do so. I assume this is just for the family and staff, which is fine, but just know that we're only going over to phase 1B. Federally, the shots have not been given downstates. It's good to get a plan of action in. However, as far as the forms, screening forms, consent forms, etc., why does it have our police, sheriff, and fire department responsible for those templates and to duplicate them? The equipment and supplies. They may be requested to provide office equipment and supplies, etc. If this isn't what the intent is, then why is it in here? If you as a city want to volunteer and do that, that's fine. We also have a community emergency response team, which I believe Councilwoman Ganem's been a part of, as well as I have also in the Omaha metro area. And the responsibility for any damages, thank goodness that's in here. But take a look at what you're agreeing to, because even though that might not be the intent, I can't imagine there's going to be a bunch of rowdies causing a ruckus to where we're going to have our policemen, boots on the ground, having to guard the vaccinations, having to help with all the paperwork, because you need people who know things about insurances and also about HIPAA and about what questions to ask the patients. The fire will be pulled into this because after you get a vaccination, all of us that have gotten one, you have to remain on site for 15 minutes to make sure you don't have an allergic reaction. Because that allergic reaction could occur fairly quick. And if a person has a very bad reaction, which if you have, not in our area, but out of state, they could quit breathing. So I'd rather have a fireman, a paramedic on the overtime, boots on the ground, being on standby than a policeman when we're short-staffed anyway. And we just now took their 2 open positions and put them as CSOs. So I'd really give some serious thought, but a paramedic can at least assist with and give an EpiPen should there be an allergic reaction. As for the medical staff that will be there from Methodist. But please review and look at what you're asking someone to sign. This is more than just security. I take no issue with security being supported by the police and assistance by the fire department. But there's a lot more into this document. And if Methodist came up with this, bless their heart, you have the job to minimize this and decide what it is you're going to allow. Because right now, this is an open-ended contract. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?
Right, for 1825 North King. I just wanted to say, Mr. Kuntz, before you give any advice on training, on any of the training or anything like that, or finding a rebuttal to what Councilman Yurder is talking about, you might want to learn how to wear your mask first.
Chief Byrne is on Zoom.
Chief Byrne, are you available?
Yes, I am. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You know, like Chief Elliott said, that's just pretty much what we had with Three Rivers. And when the vaccine started coming out, we had talks with Three Rivers because of this contract. And what our input was in this was to pick up the medication, and we would deliver it to the fire station. We administered it to our personnel, to the police personnel on a daily basis. We would not keep it on site. We would just pick it up. That was talk early with Three Rivers, and they decided not to do that, where they would just administer all the medications to all the fire and police personnel themselves. A lot of the vaccine sites now, they have been notifying us when they have them. So when there is a reaction, we know when when we do get the call, we know that what's going on at Christensen Field at that time. So a lot of these vaccines clinic sites, they notify us prior to them being set up, and possibly a reaction, and then that's when they would notify us. So if we go on route with the squad, we would know that it's a vaccine site and a reaction or some type of medical emergency due to the vaccine.
Thank you, Chief Burnt. Is there any questions for Chief Byrne or additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I don't have any further questions, but I found the dialogue from the public to be helpful with regards to clarifying some of the general concerns that I had. And even though this may be as Chief Elliott has said, well, it was a standard template, we didn't necessarily do any specific refinements specifically for Fremont and what we're going to be doing. It's just an agreement that was pulled up that the various departments can sign off on. My question for legal and my recommendation is, I think the resolution language 2021-18, the second whereas statement should be modified to say, rather than police and fire are going to adequately distribute the vaccine, that it's going to say what it does say in the staff report, that is, police and fire are going to provide security and crowd control. That's what you're being asked to do. And all these other things that are listed here are things that you may or may not do or shouldn't even do, perhaps in some cases. And so in making my motion, I guess I'm asking legal as to if we allow those, the police chief and the fire chief to sign the document that has the more specific duties, and we put in our resolution the specific duty that we're authorizing, which is security and crowd control, which overrides the other, the signed agreement document or our resolution? Because I would like to amend the resolution.
Yes, so the way the resolution is drafted right now, well, first of all, it's important to remember this MOU, I mean, it states it's a non-binding agreement. It really would be illusory if either party tried to claim some sort of damage out of this document for breach. It's our understanding that this document is strictly pro forma for the federal government so that Fremont can be financed for the services that it provides for this vaccine distribution. As far as the resolution goes, where it says, whereas each location will require assistance from police and fire to adequately distribute the vaccine, that's simply a blanket statement saying that the police and fire will assist by any means the police and fire can and are able to in the distribution of the vaccine. The distribute part isn't a term binding the police and fire to transport and distribute the vaccine themselves. So this is more of an issue of the bureaucracy getting in the way of the police and fire trying to do their jobs rather than trying to interpret a legally binding contract between the city and Methodist. But if it would make the council more comfortable to change the language in the resolution to try to limit any minutia of liability, then I don't see a problem with that.
Okay, well, I would make that motion under the pretext that I agree with some of the statements made by speakers here as to, we don't want to place our folks in the responsibility for controlling HIPAA data. That's outside the scope of what our people that we're putting in place ought to be doing. I'm not sure why we would be supplying equipment and supplies other than the personnel. and some of those kinds of things. So personally, I'd like to change that language in the whereas statement to provide security and crowd control, and that's my motion.
Councilman Coons.
Yeah, I believe in the measures that we're taking are necessary. And there's been some question on the proper wearing of masks. I think that needs to be addressed because I would be happy to give you a copy of my medical card that states I'm operating due to my health issues on 52% of my lung capacity, and I don't have to wear a mask at all. But I believe in taking these measures, and I'm going to do the best I can, regardless of my own health, to protect other people. And that's all I got to say about that.
Thank you, Mike. There's a motion on the floor to amend the second whereas statement. And this is my understanding to read each location will require assistance from police and fire to adequately provide security and crowd control. Is that the verbiage that, okay. Is there a second to that amendment? Councilman Ellis.
I second that amendment.
Okay. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2.
Okay. Now we will vote. Do we need to approve the actual now resolution and then go back to, we just need to vote one more time, correct? Okay. So this would be a vote to approve the resolution as amended. Councilman Yerger,
Make a motion to approve the resolution as
Councilman Gibson,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, motion to approve partial fee waiver for use of Christensen Field for a Fremont Wrestling invite. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Nate Schwanke, Recreation Superintendent for the city. This was a fee waiver that was brought to us by the Fremont Wrestling Club. They're looking to do about half, still pay $800 for the use of facility of Christensen Field for their youth wrestling invite. This is an event that would be the first fee waiver that we would approve for this club. They don't meet all the necessary requirements, but after taking this to the fee waiver to Park Board on Monday, February 1st, and giving all of the information to Park Board, they voted to recommend approval for this event. They normally use Fremont High School or Midland University, but with COVID-19 restrictions, they're forced to look for other avenues this year. All the money that is made by this event goes back into the club to help keep costs low for youth in the city of Fremont that do not have any other avenue in wrestling here within the city. So that's a recommendation made. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman Legban.
The 6 years, plus years I've been on this, we've never granted any waiver before, even partial waiver. And we've had some great causes that we've said no to. Now, I know this is a different situation with COVID, but usually we only grant the waiver to Red Cross and the post-prom, and that is all we've ever done in the past. So I'm a little torn on this. It's a great cause. I'm all for it, but we've never done this before. And if we do that now, I'm afraid we're opening up a whole new can of worms. And like I said, we've had some great causes before that we've said no to. If we say yes to them, then they're going to come back and say, well, we're going to try it again because of COVID. Now we want the same waiver. We want this, we want that. So I'm a little bit apprehensive on this.
Completely understand, yeah.
Councilman Coons.
Yeah, I was just gonna agree with Mark. When this item came before us 8 years ago, we just thought of doing away with all of it, but we decided the Red Cross and the post-prom were grandfathered in. And like Mark says, it's a very, very hard decision when you've got someone coming to you that wants to raise funds for someone that's dying of cancer or whatever. It's not easy to say no. That's why the rules are in place, so you can be fair to everybody across the board. So, that was the intent when this was written.
Councilman Yerger.
My only question, I think, is outside of the prohibition for waivers of weekend events, you said there are other violations of the policy. Is there other besides that one?
So they would collect a fee at the door, which is also in here as well.
That's also a prohibition?
Yep. It's lower on the list of things. But yeah, that's it. That's one. And then I believe I have one more here. Yeah, those were the two ones.
Okay.
Two that didn't meet. So,
well, here's, I'm quite sympathetic to the fact that they're looking for a location to hold this event. And I think the city needs to be supportive as much as we can on this and the other as well. But I was also concerned about precedent setting, just as the other two council members have raised. But I'm wondering if we could, and I'm asking legal, I guess, as to whether or not we get any safe haven from precedent if we tied our motion specifically to the COVID events that we currently face as a reason for exception in this regard. And if it weren't for COVID, we might follow standard policy, but due to COVID, we're relaxing and not setting ourselves up for precedent setting for all future events.
That is an option. This is a rare global pandemic event, so you can couch it under that as a special use of this right of the council. Of course, that doesn't stop public outcry, but that I like that idea to shield yourself from any claims of discriminatory intent.
Okay. I'll wait for other comment from rest of council if they have some before I would entertain any further action.
Councilman Ligman.
My only fear about that is we don't know how much longer this COVID issue could go. I mean, we're setting ourselves up for 2, 3, 4 months, 5 months down the line. And so that makes me a little nervous giving them a special issue or special grant just because of COVID. So I'm just a little leery about all of this. And there are great causes we've said no to in the past. And I think we need to keep doing that.
Councilwoman Gam.
On the other hand, if there wasn't COVID, you'd be having this event in a different location.
Yeah, correct.
Is that not correct?
Yep. They like I said, they normally have the event at Fremont High School. They've used Midland University in the past, but with restrictions and not wanting to expose student bodies even further, I believe that's why they're looking for a new facility this year.
And the fees that you would charge really, with what we charge, was what the city charges would kind of wipe out any additional profits you might be able to put back into the club. Is that correct?
Yeah. This is just.
Or does it not cover the fees that we would charge?
It would, like I said, we collect the 800, and the rest of the fees that they make on the event would go directly back into the club and help keep costs low for youth seeking that avenue to try wrestling.
And what happens if we deny this?
I believe they still will use our facility, but like I said, it just diminishes the impact that they'd be able to have on the youth here in the city. So.
And COVID presents certainly a different type of situation for all groups, and certainly for our youth and their clubs.
Thank you. Any other questions for Nate from council? If not, I'll move on to any comments from the public regarding this item. Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
If there's no other comment from council, I'd like to put out a modified motion based on the discussion with legal counsel that motion to approve this waiver would be contingent on the situation we're in with COVID-19 and is only for the year 2021 because of those COVID restrictions. I'd like this to be as narrowly approved as possible so as to eliminate possibilities of precedent. And wondering if legal counsel thinks that my wording was adequate in that motion, restricting it to COVID and for 2021 only. COVID may still be around, but they'll have to come back. We won't just perpetuate this.
Yes, I believe that's adequate.
Then I would make that motion with those caveats that it's due to COVID-19 and it's for 2021 only.
Councilman Ellis?
Yeah, these are kind of unprecedented times, so I think it gives good example for the council to make unprecedented decisions. So I would second Councilman Yerger's motion.
So this is again a motion to approve partial fee waiver for Christensen Field for Fremont Wrestling invite for 2021 based on the COVID pandemic. So we have a motion and a second. Oh, you cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2, Mayor.
Do we need to approve the amended motion? No, we can move on. Okay. Item 9, Councilmember Yerger item, motion to receive DCHS January 2021 tracking report as submitted to the city. This time we'll have report from Councilman Yerger.
Well, I pulled this off the agenda tonight for a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't originally in the packet. I put it in on the agenda late. That's why it found its way here. Understand that this report did not come to the city until after February 1st. It was distributed by the city administrator to some of us at that point. And I have a couple questions in that regard. At the last council meeting, we specifically requested that the city administrator contact Dodge County Humane Society and ask for a full and complete long form accounting of the animals they have in facility, including their intake, outtake, and the number of animals in shelter. And so my first question is, did that ask get made? And if it did they refuse to reply? Because we only got the short form again.
I mean, that's not the item on the agenda, but yes, it did, and no, they didn't.
Well, I'm sorry, would you repeat?
I said it's not the item on the agenda, but yes, I made that request, and no, they have not responded.
Okay, so the fact that they gave us the short form was out of compliance with your request. And I'm putting that in the record just because this is what they provided. And it's all we have, and it doesn't give us the requisite information that we need specifically for the purpose of Forever Homes to even know how many animals are in containment at Dodge County Humane Society. And that failure seems to be kind of egregious. The other thing that's significant in what they filed is the report doesn't even add up. And this is kind of typical of what we've been getting. If you look at the intake report, it says 4 cats and 9 dogs equals 23 intakes. The line item doesn't add across and it doesn't add down. It's a computerized report. I don't know how that can happen unless you're overwriting the computer report, because that's an extract out of their software system. So I don't know who's responsible for reviewing these documents that we get from them as a report, but certainly we should not be entering and entertaining reports that are invalid, incorrect, and don't provide the information that we want. And that's why I took it off for discussion tonight, because I think they need to be aware that we are looking at what they're providing and it's inadequate.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilman Yerger? This is just a motion to receive. So can we just get a motion to receive this? Councilman Legban?
Even though it's inadequate, it's what they gave us. So unfortunately, I'd say I'd make a motion to receive.
Councilman Coons?
And I'll second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business. Item 10, ordinance 5549, amending chapter 3, article 7 of the Fremont Municipal Code, particularly sections 3-701, municipal library operation and funding, 3-702, municipal library damaged and lost material, 3-703, municipal library book removal, and sections 3-704, municipal library cost of use. This would be for final reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Laura England Biggs, Interim Director, Keene Memorial Library. There have been no changes since we last spoke on January 26th, so I'm here for any questions, but mostly we're here for a final reading.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Councilman Gibson? No?
Oh, no, I'm.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? I would take a motion to hold final reading. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to hold final reading on ordinance 5549.
Councilman Coons.
No, second that motion.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance of the City of Fremont, Nebraska, amending Chapter 3, Article 7 of the Fremont Municipal Code, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing when the fees are effective, and providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect. On final reading.
Thank you. Cast your final vote on ordinance 5549.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 11, ordinance 5550 to annex property generally located at the southwest corner of West 23rd Street and Business Park Drive at the request of Andrew Stamp on behalf of Fabrication Holdings LLC, doing business as Ella Metal Fabrication. This would be for second reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, Jennifer Dam, Planning Director. This is the second reading of the request for this annexation. I have received confirmation from the county board that it was removed from the county industrial area. Staff recommends approval, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for our planning director? Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I'd like to make a motion to amend ordinance 5550 to incorporate a whereas statement that embodies what the planning director just indicated. The statement would read, whereas a public meeting was held by the Dodge County Board of Supervisors on January 27, 2021, at which the board confirmed the property was removed from the county's industrial area. The reason for adding that whereas statement is when this originally went through Planning Commission, it was a conditional approval because that was lacking. When it came to council for first reading, that hadn't happened. And so it would have been a conditional approval at first reading for that same reason. And since now that we have that approval, it should be reflected in the resolution so that we can move on to final reading with that embodied because they've taken the requisite action. So I would ask that that whereas statement be added to resolution 5550.
There's a motion on the floor to amend. Before I take that legal, are we good with that?
Yes, I don't have a problem with that.
Very good. Councilman Ellis.
I second that motion to clean up the whereas statement.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now I would take a motion on the amended ordinance 5550 to hold second reading. Councilman Yerger.
I'd make a motion to approve and hold second reading of ordinance 5550 as amended.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on to new business, item.
Reading or second reading.
You should hold second reading.
Thank you, Tyler. Go ahead with second reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska, annexing by voluntary petition property generally described as the east half of Lot 18 Miramar Lakeside Business Center, the west half of Lot 18 Miramar Lakeside Business Center, and tax lot 45 located in Section 16 Township 17 North, Range 8, east of the 6 p.m. Dodge County, Nebraska, and extending the corporate limits to include said real estate, providing for repeal of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for severability, and providing an effective date on second reading.
Thank you. Now moving on to new business. Item 12, motion to approve engineering contract for design of Cedar Bluffs water main project. This time we'll have staff report.
Troy Shaben, Assistant City Administrator, Utilities. Cedar Bluffs has been looking at their water supply for a few years now. They've looked at new wells, on-site treatment, buying water from an outside source, including us and Wahoo in the last year. They notified Fremont that the best choice for them was to purchase water from City of Fremont. They have some grant money available from the USDA. So the city went out for an RFP for engineering to engineer that water main to Cedar Bluffs. We received 4 responses back. They're in the backup material. You'll see JEO and Olson were the 2 lowest bids. They were very, very close. Staff selected Olson primarily because Olson's bid contained hours for basically a full-time on-site construction observer. JEO's submittal had some hours in there, but a lot of the on-site construction administration would have had to been done by utility or city staff. So for that reason, staff recommends Olson. The reason the engineering is going through the city is because ultimately the city will own and maintain that main from Fremont to Cedar Bluffs. And we wanted to be the lead agency on the engineering, because if somebody's going to connect to our system, we want to be able to control what's going on, what materials they're using. We want to make sure that we're getting stuff that conforms to our specifications and meets our requirements. The engineering is going to be fully reimbursed by Cedar Bluffs with their USDA money. This contract right now is strictly for the engineering. Cedar Bluffs will probably run the construction portion of it. We will probably come back for a change order for both the engineering and the construction portions. Typically, when we do stuff like this, we like to oversize in the hopes that we can serve areas along the route in the future. We would intend to do that once we get across the river to serve the golf course, a lot of the neighborhoods over there. There could be potential development over there in the future. But we're coming forward with this. We're doing it this way because the USDA federal funding, they have to have a bid for what Cedar Bluffs is going to bid. We would do a change order later for an upsizing of pipe and then upsizing for engineering. It would basically be a bid for this job, and then there would be alternates, additional T's where we could connect on additional valves, upsizing from an 8 to a 10 or an 8 to a 12-inch main. Again, we would own the main from Fremont to Cedar Bluffs, and all this would be reimbursed by Cedar Bluffs and USDA. I can take any questions.
Thank you, Troy. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
I just have one, I think. So when the RFP went out, did the RFP include an item requesting some sort of on-site construction observation,
Yes.
full or partial? Or was it request just for partial?
No, it was, it doesn't specify. What they'll do is they'll look at the job and try to estimate how much on-site construction administration they think they need. Honestly, this job is probably pretty easy, but if we were to hit a snag or if it were to extend out, there would be enough hours in the Olson proposal as opposed to the JE proposal. Or like I said, we would have to send our water guys out to do the construction administration. But the RFP was for engineering, design, and construction administration.
Okay, so they were free to submit whatever level of observation
Correct.
that they wanted. It's just that the one you selected, which was slightly higher, specified they would do full coverage versus the others that were not going to be full coverage. And that was at their discretion in their bid.
JEO specifically was not full coverage. Burns and McDonald was, they're obviously higher. HDR was not. But they basically two submitted full, two submitted not full.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any additional comments from council? Councilman Coons.
There's no additional comments. I'd like to make a motion to authorize staff to sign the contract.
Councilman Legban,
I will second that.
cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 13, ordinance 5552, approving sale of Tech Park property to Rock Hill Real Estate LLC to relocate Pearl Academy daycare business. This would be for first reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor and City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. What you have before you is additional lot sale to Myra Catherine Hale and Michael Bruce. They're the current owners of the Pearl Academy. They'd like to move out of the Park Place Plaza and purchase some real estate in the Tech Park for their daycare. The contract is our typical real estate purchase agreement. Again, this is the first reading, and so we don't have the exact, we don't have a plat, we don't have the meets and bounds survey yet. That's on order, and that will come before we do third and final reading, or before. If it comes before the second, we may ask you to waive the third and final, but right now it's not here yet. Typical land price that we've argued about before and settled upon. Credit's the same. They have to fulfill one job as we require everybody else. If you look at the map that I've attached, it's right next to lot 4, which is the Signal 88. And so it's the first lot west of lot 4, right on 29th Street. I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Not so much questions, a couple of comments. First, I'd just like to say that I'm glad to see that city's LB 840 money has proved to be successful usage in this case. The Pearl Academy has obviously been successful. They're moving from their current location to their own facility, and that's a real plus, I think, for the success that they've been having since they acquired LB 840 funds in the first place. So having said that, and based on your comments earlier, Mr. Newton, I'd like to suggest that when we clean up for second and third reading, it would be good if the ordinance and the purchase agreement would both state the actual acreage that once you get it specified, because right now the ordinance has 1.1 acres and the purchase agreement has 1.143 acres, and it may be something else when you're done. But those two documents should state the same thing, and the calculations of the price should be based accordingly. So I'd like those cleaned up in the second reading. The other question that I would have, and I'm not sure it's for you, but it might be for Lottie. The Tech Park sales require an additional headcount relative to the land purchase. But since they already have LB 840 funding that I'm sure probably contained job requirements in the release of LB 840 funds, is there any impact on the LB 840 commitments that were made? I assume that the tech park is in addition to the LB 840 commitments that were made. And in light of what we're doing later in the agenda relative to the 505 building and the brewery, are there any formal documents that need to be prepared for LB 840 cleanup related to the move of location? Because that's what we're doing in a later agenda item, and this is essentially the same thing. They're changing location from when they were granted funds. And do we have some cleanup to do there? Just a question.
So I think we might have to clean up some of their LB 840 because I think it's usually location specific, just as with 505 brewing. So I think we'll probably have to clean that up. If you look at the language in here, it simply says that they have to create or maintain at least one job that qualifies for the credit that we get in the tech park. And remember, that's a wage earnings requirement. It doesn't necessarily says they have to create a brand new job, but at least one of those jobs have to fulfill the requirements of the tech park. And so they're willing to do that. So,
well, as long as their contribution of one employee, however that's stated, qualifies as one of the counts in the tech park, that's the critical thing, because all people to get the $12,000 credit have to contribute a job.
That's correct.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to note relative to this particular item was that their earnest money calculation is just under 4% at 3.77%, which kind of falls in the range of some of the others that have ranged from around 3 to 5% on historic sales that we've made as well. And I just wanted to note that for further discussion later.
So can we just have first reading tonight or move to, and then clean some of this up
yeah,
for second?
we can't have final reading at all because we don't have a survey. We don't have a plat, so we're not ready. Councilman Yerger pointed out we have to marry up the purchase agreement with the ordinance. So we've got work to do. It's ordered. It'll come.
Councilman Yerger?
Have we had public comment?
No, we haven't. We'll
Sorry.
take that first. Yeah, any comments from the public? Seeing none. Now, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
Then I would make a motion to hold first reading on ordinance 5552 under the pretext we're going to clean up the ordinance and the purchase agreement information once we have the survey, so that both documents match. And check into the LB 840 with regards to the requirements for change of location paperwork.
Councilman Legman.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
The motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now introduce and hold first reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to Rock Hill Real Estate LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on first reading.
Thank you. Moving on to item 14, ordinance 5553, approving sale of tech park property to McGinn Holdings LLC to purchase additional land for future growth. This would be for first reading. At this time, we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Brad Newton, City Administrator. Well, our favorite can cooker is back. It's awesome. He discovered that he wants a bigger building than what 4.5 acres will fit. And so he's agreed to buy 2 additional lots on the east side of his currently 4.5 acres that he agreed to buy. We're going to plat it separately. That gives him the option down the road. He can either administratively combine it into a final plat, or you can decide to add a different building on this 2 acre or 2+ acre parcel. And so that's the reason you see it being separate purchase agreement, separate everything. We'll just proceed with the first 4.5 acres and we'll follow up with this one. So any questions? It's the same agreement that was negotiated by his attorney, Dave Mitchell. We simply just amended it to decrease the jobs. I think the last time he had 3, this one's got 1. All the other things, and I think we lowered the earnest money, but all the rest of the terms are exactly the same. So different amounts, of course. So Any
Coun-
questions?
Councilman Yerger?
Well, a few comments on this one, as I did on the last purchase. Again, similar in this regard, it looks like we have to do survey work here as well, so it might not be 2.217 acres.
That's
It could be
exactly
something
right.
else.
Yep.
But again, the purchase agreement and the ordinance should reflect both the specific acreage when we're done. So that needs to happen here. The other observation that I had was that at some point, we said it would really be great if we standardized the terms and conditions of these sales. And on every other sales agreement we've had now, except for this particular purchaser, we have used $32,500 as the target rate for sale. This one's pretty close, but it's not 32.5. And I'm just curious as to why not, since we said we were going to standardize the $32,500 offering. My other concern is, and I raised this the last time, and I mentioned it on the previous sale as well as precursor to this one. Earnest money here is only $1,000 on the $71,000 purchase, which is less than 1.5%. Yet the previous sale, we required 3.78%. And on some of these, we've required as high as almost 5%. And I do not understand, I didn't understand it on the previous sale for this particular purchaser and or this one, why they don't have to put up equal earnest money with regards to this sale. Seems like fairness would dictate that we treat everybody pretty similar in this regard. It may not be 100% identical, but ought to be pretty similar. But 1.5% versus just under 4% to others who have been just under 5% doesn't seem to be reasonable. I think we should have asked for higher earnest money, and I think that should happen. Here's my biggest concern relative to this one, and I raised it last time. I think that the city side negotiations are failing us in this respect, and we're not doing our due diligence and fiscal responsibility to the citizens of Fremont when we're allowing a purchaser to dictate whether they will or won't pay for infrastructure costs. This contract and the last one that they had says they're not going to pay for streets, they're not going to pay for sewer, they're not going to pay for water, they're not going to pay for sanitary connection, they're not going to pay for gas, and they're not going to pay for electric. But everybody else in the tech park is. And that doesn't seem to be consistent and fair to me. And I believe and suggested last time that paragraph 20 in this contract should be stricken for that reason. And I'm going to contend the same thing with regards to this purchase agreement tonight. I fully welcome their purchase of the property, but I don't think that we should entertain paragraph 20. It got passed last time with that in there. I thought that was a mistake. We're repeating it again here. And I guess for council, I would point out the fact that it doesn't stop here with regards to what they want and intend to do with regards to funding this particular purchase. Because in item 21 of this purchase agreement, it indicates that downstream they intend to ask for TIF and more LB 840 money besides. Others aren't doing that. And in all fairness, they can ask for TIF and they can ask for LB 840. So I'm not going to contend paragraph 21. But on top of asking for total waiver of all other infrastructure costs in item 20, I do think it's time for the council to strike item 20 from the purchase agreement and see what happens. Because I think in fairness to the citizens of Fremont who have to pay when others don't, that's an inappropriate contract insertion. And I make a motion to remove paragraph 20 from this purchase agreement.
So before you do that, as I mentioned the last time, the city is furnishing all these in the street at the property line. So they're not getting any advantage that anybody else is. Anybody that buys a lot in there gets water, sewer, and electric and gas at the street, at the property. That applies to everybody. This one just has it in writing. That's the only difference. They're not getting anything different than anybody else is getting.
So I would ask you this question. We have several unpaved streets throughout the city of Fremont. And if we pave those streets, who pays? The city? Or do we put that as a tax assessment against the property owners that street runs in front of?
Again, that's completely off subject. I'm not going to answer.
It's a comparable depiction here. We're putting in a street, 29th Street. It has a cost in our one-year plan that has to be done by September, and it's $800,000 as the estimate. And nobody is going to pay for that unless we say, well, those that are along the street on both sides, like they do in residential properties, are going to pay their fair share of that street. If we don't do that, then the citizens of Fremont pay. And my question is, they don't do that, I think, in residential areas. Why are we granting it here? It seems to me that these businesses should participate in the paving of their streets and the infrastructure.
So anybody that buys a lot is participating in those costs. All those costs get rolled into the price of the lot. They're paying for the street, just as we said last time.
Well, not technically, because they're all getting a $12,000 relief.
Let's go ahead. I had the applicant's attorney is here. We haven't done public comment yet. So let's go. If there's no other questions for staff, I'll move to the comments from the public.
All right, just a minute. Let me turn the volume up.
Mr. Mitchell, you're on Zoom.
Yes.
You can go ahead.
Thank you. I'll just address a few of those points. The earnest money, to begin with, we're fully willing to increase that earnest money amount. I think that was suggested by the city, but as a practical matter, with any of these projects, if the concern is getting enough earnest money and focusing on that as opposed to focusing on the overall project, I think the focus is misguided. The earnest money, in my view, is not something that you count on or even hope to have returned in a project. And certainly in this case, the earnest money isn't going to drive the decision for Seth to build or not to build. But in good faith, if you want to raise the earnest money up to, say, 3%, which I think is $2,500, consistent with the previous agreement, if my math was correct, sure, we're okay with that. I'd like to join the explanation of Brian Newton. We understood that and understand that the cost per acre includes the cost of all that infrastructure. And the $12,000 credit only has relevance to the state program that gave rise to the loan for the city to acquire this particular tract. And so we're buying this property with the understanding that that infrastructure is built in, just like every other property owner that is buying property out there. And certainly I would hope that the councilman is not suggesting that we should have to pay twice for the same thing. Paragraph 20 simply puts in writing our expectation that we're not going to be paying extra for those improvements because as a practical matter, we're already paying for those in the per acre purchase price. As far as the commentary of other streets that was made as an analogy to that particular paragraph, I would offer that the city is the developer in this case. The city owns the real estate. And so the developer is generally obligated to put the streets in at the developer's cost, which the developer can share those costs with the purchasers of lots, which is being done here by a higher purchase price, or you set up paving districts or SID or whatnot where they're specially assessed back. Either way, in this particular case, my client is paying for the infrastructure, as is each of the other property owners who have purchased property along this street and expect that it be paved by September. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Any questions for the applicant's attorney? Seeing none, is there any other comments from the public? Go ahead.
Susan Jacobus, 1805 North D Street here in Fremont. There is a concern on both paragraphs 20 and 21. I've not seen in any of the city contracts for over 4 years to where we were going to be subject to a penalty as a city entity at $100 a day for non-performance. There is an issue with earnest money and being fair and equitable and setting precedent. As far as the paving, Mr. Mitchell touched on that. Thank you for that. Paving districts should be a cost head back to the property owners if that's what we do. streets have to be expanded over in Sunridge, I believe the developer had to help pay for that. It shouldn't be a precedent that taxpayer has to pay for the paving of the streets. And if it's 800,000 or $1 million, it comes out of my pocket too, because I am a property owner and I pay taxes. As far as the TIF, I guess it's a given that you're all going to approve the TIF. Because if you don't, it negates this contract. That doesn't make sense. Nothing should ever be a given. I have an issue with that being contingent upon the follow through of the purchase of the property. That should follow through the same chain like anybody else within the city. Whether or not the land that it has to tie to agrees to be declared blighted and substandard, that's not your headache right now. Your headache is approving this contract, which should have been considered at the prior contract. This $100 a day penalty clause and paving the district, why are you doing that? This was an issue on the first contract that was given. It's an issue on it now. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, any additional comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I would only make these final comments with regards to what the cost to the city is from what I believe to be an assessment of the underlying data. The city paid essentially $1.6 million for this property, roughly a little $20,400 per lot. We've committed LB 840 funds to the tune of $1,900,000, or roughly $24,000 a lot, which brings these lot costs to about $44,000. What we're yielding out of these lot sales is like 20, because we're flowing through the state credits that was given for land acquisition to the purchasers, effectively negating a significant share of cost, $20,000 versus a residual post state CGBG refund of $32,300 for the properties. That's what the city should be getting in my mind, and we're getting 20. So it's a good buy for those purchasing, and I'm glad they're buying. But to think that we have to give in writing waivers, you're never going to charge me again for another thing. I think given the fact that we're already as citizens selling for less than what we have invested or will have invested in these properties, it behooves us to not put other extra caveats into the purchase agreements. And so I still have my motion on the floor to strike paragraph 20. If others are getting the same thing as city administrator indicates, then striking this paragraph should be no problem, because everybody will be treated the same anyway. But this is specifying treatment that is not in any other contract with any other purchase of property that we've had in the tech park.
Before I entertain that motion, is there any other comments from council? All I would say in regards to this is, this tech park was sitting vacant for a decade. The goal of this data park, 80 acres, was for the city to develop and attract industry and business to the area. At this point, we have more interest in this area than we've ever have. And not only with Seth's property, and now he wants to buy more lots and expand even more. This was the goal of this development. And for finally, we're seeing investment, and not just in this property, but in Summit Medical and Signal 88. And now we just got through with Pearl Academy. And so, I think we have to also think about the intent and goal of the tech park. And now we have, again, more lots. We haven't sold a lot in 10 years. There's a request to buy additional lots. And according to our staff, they're getting everything that everybody else gets, the same thing. So that's all I'll say in regards to this. If there's no other comments from council, there's a motion on the floor, be to strike paragraph 20. And is there a second to that? Councilman Ellis.
Mr. Mayor, I can appreciate your your concern about, the tech park remaining dormant for so long. And I do appreciate the companies that have come forward. But what I don't appreciate is certain individuals being treated differently. And so if City Administrator Brian said we could revoke Article 20 because we're treating everyone the same, then I would suggest that we do that. Remove Article 20. I do not like the fact that the city is been put in a sling that says we owe $100 if we don't get it done. So if second the motion to remove Article 20.
Is there any other comments from council in regards to this? Everybody clear on the motion and the second?
I do. It would not, by striking that, it doesn't change anything else with the purchase or buyer or seller. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't change. They put that in there. They just wanted to safeguard. It's no different than the penalty. They wanted to safeguard in there. We have a contractor that's going to be paving the street. He has a higher penalty and the same deadline. So technically we're fine. So there's no problem. And I don't care about removing this paragraph. I mean, Dave Mitchell may weigh in because I know Dave negotiated that with Travis. And so it's really more of a legal matter than administrative. So Travis, you might want to weigh in.
Councilwoman Ganem, the only aspect of this paragraph, the way it affects the agreement, is that it was a negotiated term on top of the other terms by the purchaser. So I think we're past the point of public comment. This is first reading. I would just ask the council hold first reading, and I can reach out to Mr. Mitchell and see if we could work something out to the effect of modifying or removing this paragraph. I just don't want to scare people away from purchasing these lots. But I'm willing to reach out and see if I can negotiate new terms for that specific paragraph.
Councilman Jensen.
Am I correct in understanding there's going to be significant employment going on in these properties that Mr. McGlynn is putting in out there?
Yeah, I mean, he's committed to 3 for the first purchase and an additional one here. Summit Medical is the big one. I mean, Summit Medical plans on doing 40 plus. They will fulfill the state requirement, they themselves. So
This is at least the third time that Seth McGinn has gotten raked over the coals here by the council, and frankly, I'm tired of it.
Any other comments from council before we vote? Seeing none, cast your votes.
Motion fails 3-5.
Okay, now we're back. I would entertain a motion to introduce and hold first reading. Councilman Coons.
Like the motion to introduce and hold first reading of ordinance 5553.
Councilman Jensen.
And I will second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 7-1, Mayor.
We'll now have first reading.
An ordinance pertaining to the sale and conveyance of real estate owned by the city of Fremont, Nebraska to McGinn Holdings LLC pursuant to Nebraska law on first reading.
Thank you. Moving on to item 15, resolution 2021-020, approving an amendment to Cassell Enterprises LLC, doing business as 505 Brewing Company LLC's local option economic development award by adding the address of 349 North Main Street to the loan documents and authorizing the mayor to sign the appropriate transactions. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Lottie Mitchell, Plan Administrator. Tonight, we are asking you to consider amending 505 Brewing Company's original LB 840 award. They were originally awarded $165,000, 100% forgiveness, to renovate the basement level of the 505 building at 505 North Main Street and renovate that into their brewery space. The construction and renovation of the 505 building has been delayed. They have secured a lease agreement at 349 North Main Street, which is the old Diamond Vogel building, and are asking that they be able to use their LB 840 award monies at that location. There is still the possibility for them to renovate the basement space at the 505 building at 505 North Main Street, and allowing this amendment allows them to utilize those funds at both locations, as we would list both addresses instead of just 505 North Main Street. Tonight, one more point I wanted to make was that this amendment does not change their job creation requirements. They are still required to create those 5 full-time positions. And in the staff report, I did lay out the timeline that they would still be required to meet. And with this new, the change in address, they still would meet that timeline. And with us here tonight, we've got Tim Gazelle and Sean Morrow with 505 Brewing Company. I'd invite them to come and speak about their project.
All right. Thank you, Lottie. Tim Gazelle, 800 East Seward Street, Seward, Nebraska, owner of 505 Brewing Company. Lottie stated it very well. I think we sat here in December of 2019 and had the same conversation. So what we're looking to do is amend and our location so that we can get going a little sooner. We have equipment already purchased. It's ready to go. This business plan change would also help us a little bit when it comes to distribution, as this location being on the main floor is much better suited for distribution. So it may in turn help us accelerate that part of the business a little sooner than what we had originally. So we're committed to Fremont. We want to make this a reality, and sooner than later it'd be good for us. I know it is everyone. So thank you for considering the amendment. And Sean, do you have any other comments? So I guess I'll open up to any questions from the council and mayor.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Yerger.
Not so much. Well, I do have a question, but obviously you're enthusiastic to get this going. I think we've been enthusiastic for your participation downtown and what you're going to bring to the community. So no issues there. And the address change seems straightforward. Lottie indicated in her report, and she stated tonight as well, but it's my understanding that once you've actually invested in putting your brewery into the lease facility, the likelihood of your moving it to the 505 building for logistical reasons and others maybe is not something that's necessarily in the future, although maybe you'll participate in that building in other ways. The brewery is probably going to be where it's going to be located. Is that accurate?
The production equipment itself, that building is much better suited for that. So when we talk distribution and that side of the business, it'll always be in that location. Where the 505 could come into play later is expanded growth of the, I guess, space for the bar itself and the tap room. And you still may have some brewing equipment in there, maybe a smaller system just for customers to see. But yes, your production would always be in the 349 North Main Street building.
So we're getting improvements in 2 buildings with regards to this versus we were going to improve all in one before. Now we're getting a twofer.
Yep, potentially, yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant or Lottie? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Jensen.
If there's no further comment, I'll make the motion to approve resolution 2021-2020.
Councilman Legban.
And that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 16, resolution 2021-021, approving a local option economic development loan for 505 Main Street Group LLC, authorizing staff to negotiate a loan agreement and authorizing the mayor to sign the appropriate loan transactions. This time we'll have staff report.
Mayor, City Council, Lottie Mitchell, Plan Administrator. This item is an application for the renovation of floors 2 through 5, which will be the apartment units for 505 North Main Street. The application has been submitted by Ryan Durant and Matt Daughtry, who are the owning members of 505 Main Street Group LLC. The project consists of a mix of 28 studio and 1-bedroom apartments on the upper floors. The entire building will have commercial space on first floor and commercial space on the basement, but this application is specifically for the apartments. I wanted to make that clear. It's for the apartments only. 505 building has been a high priority catalyst project as part of revitalizing downtown Fremont since 2012. It specifically is called out in the downtown revitalization plan. 505 Main Street Group has secured traditional financing, state and federal historic tax credits, and pledged their own cash. But a gap still remains. Renovating a historical building into apartment units is not for the faint of heart. So their project costs are coming in at just over $7 million. They are requesting an LB 840 award of $465,000. We would recommend making that in 3 equal tranches of $155,000 each. The Citizens Advisory Review Committee did review the application and recommends council's approval. The local option review team also reviewed the application and also recommends approval. They also recommended paying those tranches out, the first one being paid after the start of construction, and that would be proven by the submission of construction draws. The second tranche will be paid once construction reaches 50% completion, and the third tranche will be paid once the apartments are approved for occupancy. Tonight with us, we've got Ryan Durant here in the council chambers. If you'd like to say a few words, Ryan, or if you have any questions for him.
Thanks, Lottie. Mayor, council members, Ryan Durant, 1110 North Skyline Drive, Elkhorn, Nebraska. Happy to be here with you this evening. Obviously, lost my biggest tenant here, Tim Gazelle, and the 505 Brewing, but still excited for Tim in downtown Fremont. I want to put that in the record, and obviously it's good that they're staying downtown. I think that's the right fit for them. So, our goal is still to move forward with the 505 and do 28 apartments. These apartments will be what I would like to call workforce housing for young professionals. So hopefully help you guys get talent like nurses, teachers, firefighters, police officers. Maybe some seniors want to live downtown and not scoop their sidewalks anymore. That's fine too. But just an opportunity to have some different living situation in Fremont, I think, and kind of do something a little different downtown. So we're excited. The 505 is something I've been looking at since 2018. I will say that there has been deterioration over the years and costs are going up. COVID has screwed up a lot of supply chains. Just even getting something as simple as an appliance has turned into an ordeal. So it's been an interesting last year, but we're finally ready to move forward with your guys' assistance. If there's any questions, I'd love to take them.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councilman Yerger.
I don't really have any questions. I just have it's really a thank you, I think, for helping us perform downtown revitalization. I see this project as being, as well as the brewery project, being a couple of stalwarts for downtown revitalization, something desperately needed for Fremont. And LB 840 money spending in this regard, I think, is really important. I'm glad you applied. I'm glad we could provide, and I'm anxious to see construction work going on in that building because I think it's going to be a centerpiece for Fremont. And so thank you for doing so. Appreciate the effort. I know it's probably a risky venture. Building needs a lot of work, but I commend you for doing it. And that's really all I got. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilman Ellis.
Right, and I think I can speak for most of the citizens of Fremont. We're very excited about the 505 going forward. It's going to be a great addition to the downtown. I really do appreciate your time and efforts and your dedication to downtown Fremont. Lottie, I have to give you a shout out. I heard what you did. You helped them out. You tried to figure out ways to get around, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Councilman Yerger?
Assuming there's none, I'd like to approve recommend approval of resolution 2021-021.
Councilwoman Ganem? Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. And good luck with everything on the 505 and the brewery. Moving on to item 21, resolution 2021-022, approving related party transactions and conflict of interest policy. This time we'll have staff report.
If I turn it on, Mayor, City Council, Brian Newton, City Administrator. This is the first of several policies we'll be bringing to you. For years, the auditors have suggested we have several policies. This is one of them. This is a related party transactions and conflict of interest. This is, if you read the policy, it really just mirrors state law as far as conflicts of interest and when you have to file a disclosure with the clerk as far as with Accountability Disclosure Commission. It's just something that the auditors felt that we've needed for a long time, and it was also a best practice amongst other cities and utilities. And so I think Jody's online too. And so Jody, did you have any comments? You know, you speak with the auditors more than I do, so.
Right. Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. Can you hear me?
No, can't hardly hear you, Jody.
Can you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Jody Sanders, Director of Finance. Each year when you receive the audit report from the auditors, there's a paragraph in their letter to those charged with governance that references oral comments that they give us. They are the kinds of things that are, as Brian mentioned, best practices, good things to do. And it's not so much that we weren't doing those things that are listed out in the policy, but that you have it committed to writing and approved by your city council. And that's really all that we're doing tonight is asking you to actually approve what we've been doing in practice.
Thank you, Jody. Any questions for staff? Councilman Yerger.
Well, my question is really one directed to legal primarily, I think, relative to our crafting of the policy statement and the reference therein to NADC form C2A. As I understand the reference to state law, it's state law covers the restrictions on elected officials and employees. And I'm wondering whether or not our policy is intended to be more restrictive in the sense that the form that's referred to here, C2A, would appear to only be applicable to officials or that hold elective office. C2A doesn't say anything about employees. And the instructions for C2A also don't say anything about employees. I'm not suggesting that we can't necessarily have that, but would that constitute an additional restriction relative to the forms that we're referencing? That is, we're being more restrictive, requiring employees to do the same as elected officials. Is that your understanding of the policy that we're putting in place, that we're following the more restrictive form if you will, that is applicable to other entities besides us in state government?
I wouldn't say the policy is more restrictive than state law. The reference to that application is just the way of administratively creating a policy that adheres to state law.
Well, it's more inclusive, is it not? I mean, the C2A would say elected officials only, and our policy statement is elected officials and employees. So it is more inclusive, which is reflective of the instructions of Form C2, both of which are covered under state statute.
I guess I'm not understanding the relevance to this policy. Are you wanting to make it more restrictive or less restrictive?
No, I'm just curious as to whether the resolution policy that we're embracing should just reflect, since we're referencing Form C2A, if the policy language should just reflect that elected officials are required to do X rather than elected officials and employees, because that's what is required on Form C2, but C2A looks like it is just for elected office holding people. And I just was trying to get clarity if that's the fact. Do we want both, or do we want just elected officials? Maybe we shouldn't be reflecting Form C2A in our policy. It should be C2, but I don't think that's appropriate. I think it needs to be C2A for our size of city. So then I'm wondering whether it should stay elected officials and employees or just elected officials.
Okay, so you want to remove the public employees aspect? If the city would,
that might be in concert with Form C2A, and that's what I'm asking.
No, I think, Travis, even as employees, we can fill out C2A because you file it with the clerk. So even though state law doesn't require us to fill that particular form out, we can require it. So we are being a little more restrictive in saying if there is an employee that has a conflict or potential conflict, they then should fill out Form C2A and file it with the clerk.
Yep.
And City Administrator, I'm not objecting to that. I'm just asking whether or not we're actually following the more restricted state law, which applies to others than us, because we could have stopped at elected officials, but we are not. And I'm fine with that.
Correct.
It's just that we are being more restrictive voluntarily.
We are. And
Yes.
that with the auditor's advice is that we include employees as well.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions for staff? Any comments from the public? Any comments from council? Take a motion in regards to this item. Councilman Coons,
Make a motion to approve the resolution.
Councilman Legman,
I don't think I heard it all, but I will second that motion to approve resolution 2021-022.
thank you. Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 18, mayoral appointments. This is my item. In your packet, you'll see a report with some appointments, different boards. One of them is the Building Code Advisory and Appeals Board, as well as a few other boards that we're just formally making the appointments where before we haven't. So you see the Joint Water Management Board, Northeast Nebraska Solid Waste Coalition, League of Nebraska Municipalities, and then the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District. I would take any questions from council in regards to these appointments. Seeing none, are there any comments from the public?
Ray Tuff at 1825 North King. I just wanted to say that maybe there should be a limit on your terms for how long people can serve. Because we have some of those boards that they've had people for a long time on them boards. Not saying that they did a bad job or anything, but just to get extra eyes on the subjects, you know? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, any comments from council? Councilman Yerger.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to the mayor for moving this item to regular agenda and off consent as we discussed many times over. So I applaud you for doing that. Thank you very much.
Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I would take a motion to approve these appointments. Councilman Coons,
Make a motion to approve the appointments.
Councilman Sukram,
I'll second that.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Moving on, item 19, ordinance 5554, updating utility salary schedule to adjust the environmental engineering technician position. There's a request to hold final reading. This time we'll have staff report.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, Jennifer McDuffie, Human Resources Director. We recently had a vacancy in the environmental engineering technician position. As I've discussed before, whenever we have an opening like this, we tend to try to take a step back, determine what's the most efficient and effective use of our resources, and evaluate whether the way the position is currently structured is the way we want it to look going forward, if that's the best use of our resources. When we looked at this position, we decided that we wanted to change the structure and the responsibilities of the position. We actually would reduce the responsibilities and reassign the supervisory responsibility to a different position. So in doing that, we are asking to adjust the utility salary ordinance accordingly by moving the environmental engineering tech position from a 27.5 pay grade down to a pay grade of 27. As the mayor mentioned, we are also asking that this be placed on final reading tonight. We have quite a few reports that are due. This position handles a lot of the environmental reporting. We have a lot of those reports that are due within the next 60 days. So we'd like to get recruiting and hiring process started as soon as possible. It's kind of a rough time for us not to have someone in this position. So that is why we are asking to have this ordinance placed on final reading tonight. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for our HR director? Councilman Yerger.
Yes, Jennifer, I'm interested in understanding, is there some sort of typical wage difference for positions with supervisory responsibilities versus those that don't, as we look at the wage chart or ordinance 55, 54, or those that apply to other jobs that aren't on ordinance 55, 54? Is there some sort of standard with regards to supervisory responsibility as to what the range is?
We do not have a standard established. Again, as I've discussed in the past, we tend to use these as we do comparability studies. We are actually in the process of doing one for this position, is included in the one that we're doing. Without having that information and looking at the amount of supervisory responsibility, there wasn't a lot. We just felt that a half a step drop was reasonable. And when we compared it to other positions that are in the same department and other positions on the ordinance that were in similar pay grades, we felt that was an adequate adjustment.
I don't have the old pay scales in front of me, but what's the change in the initial step one rate between 27.5 and 27?
Give me 1 second here.
Half a dollar or so?
No, it's 80 cents.
80 cents?
Ish.
That's good enough. I just was curious.
It's on the
reason. Part of my reason for asking that, when we just approved CSO officers and officer supervisors at the last session that we had, those positions were separated by 1 whole point difference in their pay scale, supervisory versus regular officer. And so I was interested or curious as to why this only gets a half a step difference.
This position only supervised 1 individual. So it was a smaller supervisory, and it wasn't around the clock staff that they were supervising, or was,
So
they worked the same
only
hour.
supervised 1.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Jennifer? Or any comments from the public? Are there any additional comments from council? First, take a motion to introduce and hold first reading. Councilman Jensen.
I'll make the motion to introduce and hold first reading of ordinance 5554.
Councilman Legban.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes. Introduce.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Now have first reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5501 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on first reading.
Now there's a request to suspend the rules and move to final reading. I would take a motion in that regard. Councilman Jensen.
Yes, I will make the motion to suspend the rule, move ordinance 5554 to third and final reading.
Councilman Sukram.
I'll second that.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
We'll now have final reading.
An ordinance of the city of Fremont, Nebraska pertaining to pay plan for officers and employees, repealing ordinance number 5501 and all other ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing for publication in pamphlet form and providing an effective date on final reading.
Cast your votes.
Motion carries 8-0, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving on to item 20, Councilmember Yerger item, open public discussion of the city's and the council's action plans regarding Forever Homes and Dodge County Humane Society. Before we open up this item, legal, can you please just weigh in on this item, please?
Yeah, really, as I advised the council last week, we do not recommend discussing the DCHS contract in a public forum due to the potential exposure to liability. I believe just today, the attorney for DCHS filed a public records request. There appears to be, I don't want to have the city be exposed to any liability once this matter finally is going to be resolved. So I'd recommend not holding a discussion on the DCHS contract.
Thank you. Councilman Yerger, can you just help us with your intent with this item?
I can.
Okay.
And I would only say, in light of, after I give my rationale and intent, if legal still feels that we need to go into executive session for that purpose, in any way, shape, or form that we can't discuss what I have, then I'm making a formal request that we do that, because we can do that without having it on the agenda. So I'm reserving that. But I've been fielding a lot of calls from the public inquiring on just how the new Forever Home contract and the city's use of CSOs will work, and what the real cost of that approach is going to be for the city. This approach was created in large measure by the city administrator and the mayor working in concert with Forever Home, and a request for them to modify their original RFP bid response. That was an all-encompassing proposal of $237,000. Roughly $37,000 of that was for animal control. Now that the council has approved that contract with Forever Home, and we're now using vacant police officer positions to facilitate having 2 CSO positions, bringing enforcement officers up to 3. Now would be an excellent time for the mayor and the city administrator to fully explain the operating logistics for the city's animal control and its contracting sheltering services, as well as explain the real cost of all of these city services to the public, because you guys can probably do a better job of expressing your intent than me. And some of the things that I was asked is, can you explain the overall cost of providing animal control and sheltering? Whether and how the additional costs are all covered by the current budget, how the logistics of having 3 agencies involved will work, how it is fiscally responsible for the city to pay 3 agencies to provide animal control and sheltering services, were kind of a collage of the questions that I was getting, and hopefully you could answer without broaching the concerns of legal. And I guess I'd ask legal based on what I just said. You have any trepidations about our speaking to those matters in open public session?
My only concern would be whether answers to those questions involves potential plans that the city may have or want to pursue regarding the DCHS contract. I think would be pertinent to answering those. And if this is the cost of the contracts, I think, are already out in the public. I guess my concern would be whether, if the intent here is to get the public's redress out into the open, then I don't have a problem with that. But if there's an intent to have the city responding to those specific questions, I do think it is implicated that the DCHS contract and the potential litigation we would have with the DCHS contract would be implicated.
Well, I think in large measure, most of those things that I just mentioned have to do with how are you going to run logistically your operation now that you have a forever home contract, you have CSOs, calls are going to go to dispatch, they're going to get referred, animals are going to get surrendered and dropped off. You know, what communication is going to be given to the public and how they function with what we've just put in place. We haven't done that. The people don't understand how it's going to work. And quite honestly, I'm not sure they fully understand, based on the comments I'd had with them, what the true cost is. We have a contract for $190,000 and some change. We have CSOs that we're going to pay, which, you know, could add conceptually, if you count 3 or 2, you know, it's going to be another $100,000 or more with equipment. And then we have other costs on top of that for training and logistics. I just think that the public wants the administration and those responsible for taking us down this path to explain how logistically that works and how paying out funds that approach $350,000 or $400,000, even without the DCS piece, was fiscally prudent. Those are the kinds of questions that I've been getting, and I'd like help with the answers. And it seems to me the administration can weigh in on that. And I'd like to have them tell the public tonight how that came about and why this is the appropriate way to go, and how we do handle making those calls and taking those calls from the public, et cetera, for strays and surrenders.
Well, if it's a public information campaign, then that's really not the purpose of a city council meeting. Certainly,
Travis, they're going to be here and speaking to us, and they have been. Every meeting we've given them the opportunity to speak since April. And I have the sense from the people that I'm talking to, they're not going to go away until they understand what we're doing and what we're paying. And I think we owe it to the public to do it. I don't know why you can't use a city council meeting to make those representations to the public so that they understand. The sooner that they can get relief and stop coming to our meetings, they'll be pleased, and so will we.
Again, my job is to protect the city from liability.
Here and chime in.
And my job is to protect the city from liability. And if you would like to get information out to the public that doesn't expose the city to liability, you could hold a public forum or whatever means. But this meeting is for conducting business.
Travis, I'll go ahead. I'll address it. You know, since myself and this new council took our seats in December, addressing these concerns of animal control and sheltering services has been one of this group's top priorities. Myself, along with this council, have worked tirelessly to work out a long-term solution for Fremont. In less than 2 months in office, we have worked out an agreement with Forever Homes, approved the process of hiring new community service officers that will help in animal control. These CSOs will also support the future growth of our police department. We remain 100% committed to this issue. Those that still have concerns, I ask you to remain patient, trust that we are working as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. Our goal is to focus on the animals, listen to the community, and do our due diligence. I ask you to look at this body's track record, what we've accomplished in less than 2 months regarding these issues. Our collective goal together is to work things out and turn these challenges into strengths. We hear you, we understand you, we're working as quickly as we can. So that's my comments in regards to this. I would, again, second legal in this way, in that way, and tell the public we're doing everything we can, and to be patient with us. And, this is a priority for this group as a whole. Councilman Jensen.
Yeah, given what legal's had to say in their advice, I believe I'm going to make the privilege motion that we continue this indefinitely.
Object. I'm sorry, I already had a tentative motion on the floor to go to executive session should something come up in this regard, and that should pre-exist a motion that you just made, because I had a pending motion on the floor when I was speaking.
Legal, was there a motion? I don't remember. I mean, can you help?
I reserved the opportunity for a motion to go into executive session at the very beginning of my discussion, and then I went on to explain what my expectations were.
Either way, under privilege motions,
discuss this in public, my motion to go into executive session should stand.
The privilege motion would be made after Brad's motion and would be voted on first before the original question of Brad's motion is pondered by the council. That's Robert's rules.
Did the mayor recognize the first motion?
The privilege motion is addressed first, and then if that fails, then we go back to the original motion. If we would like to constitute Councilmember Yerger's reservation of a motion as a motion.
I'll entertain the privilege. This body can decide if they want to continue it indefinitely. That's your vote at this point. So if you don't want to do that, this is your chance to vote on that. So I will go with Councilman Jensen's motion. Is there a second?
Thank you.
Councilman
Legban?
I will second that.
Cast your votes.
So we don't get a say tonight? Sitting here for 2.5 hours. Got me afraid. It's ridiculous.
Motion carries 5-3.
I would take a motion to adjourn.
No. I have my light on.
Councilman Yerger.
I would like to make a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing threatened and potential litigation.
There are no items left on the agenda. The only thing left is to adjourn.
What's that, Travis?
There are no items left on the agenda.
Executive session can be called at any time for any purpose. We don't have to have it on the agenda, and I'm hereby calling for an executive session. Check the rules.
It can be called in response to an item on the agenda. There is no current item on the agenda remaining.
Okay, Travis, can we just take a vote?
Well, there's nothing to take a vote on other than to adjourn.
Let's just take a vote. If this body wants to go into executive session, I don't see a reason why they couldn't. So
it's just a potential.
So there's a motion to go in executive session. I would take a second. Do I need to repeat the language before? Let me back up. I don't have the.
I have it.
There wasn't a second, though.
The motion would be to go into executive session for the purpose of strategy session with respect to potential and threatened litigation, and for the further reason that an executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. That's essentially what I wanted to discuss originally. I think it's still pertinent. We have not adjourned.
Is there a second? Councilman Ellis? Can I see your? A motion has been made and seconded to go into executive session for the purpose of a strategy session with respect to contract negotiation and
No, not
potential
contract, just legal, potential.
strategy session with respect to potential threatened litigation and for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Is there any discussion? The pending motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of the strategy session for respect to contract negotiation and potential threatened litigation for the further reason that the executive session is necessary for the protection of the public interest. Cast your votes.
The motion fails 4-4.
Oh, come on, Mayor.
No.
Chicken.
Take a motion to adjourn. Councilman Legban,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Councilman Jensen,
A second.
cast your votes.
Motion carries 6-2.
We are adjourned.